Welcome to the debate. Imagine a romance that begins, with the magic of a high school dance near Mount Kenya.
Yeah. Right, the classic teenage setup.
Exactly. Yeah. But it ends years later with a devastating, blunt, physical letter reading, I am sorry, I have another dude.
Ouch. Yeah, that is rough.
It really is. So today we are looking at the messy, murky waters of childhood romantic abandonment. For those of you in college studying modern relationship dynamics or youth development, consider this a masterclass. We are analyzing a highly specific documented case study.
The history of Robbie and Jay.
Right. Two teenagers who navigated a long-distance relationship in rural Kenya, surviving entirely on handwritten letters before it all completely collapsed.
It is just an incredibly rich behavioral landscape to explore. I mean, when we look at this case study through the lens of clinical and social psychology, it forces us to examine how attachment patterns form in, really high-friction environments.
Oh, absolutely.
We are observing this collision of adolescent development, long-distance communication, and severe socioeconomic pressure.
Okay. And looking at that collision, I argue that this narrative is actually a hallmark indicator of secure persistence, real romantic resilience. My position today is that
it forces us to examine how attachment patterns form in, really high-friction environments.
Oh, absolutely. Immense patience. I mean, the failure of this relationship was not born of psychological dysfunction. Yeah.
I don't know about that.
We are looking at historical land inequalities that literally forced Jay to prioritize financial survival. I look at the exact same behavior.
Well, I commit it from a completely different way. I look at the exact same behavioral data and I see glaring, undeniable signs of an
anxious, preoccupied. That feels a bit harsh.
But it's accurate. Robbie's behavior, his relentless clinging to an idealized past, his refusal to accept the reality of their divergent paths, it's all rooted in deep insecurity.
Yeah.
I just don't see it as insecurity.
Yeah.
I mean, I will argue that he uses class differences and historical inequality, not as the actual cause of the breakup, but as a post hoc psychological shield. It's just a way to rationalize a teenage romance that simply reached its natural expiration date.
Yeah. Okay, I see why you think that. But let me offer a different perspective by examining the foundational mechanics of their connection. Let's look at how this relationship actually functioned day to day during their O-levels.
Right, the letter writing era.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Robbie initiated this with an actual, quote, application for love. He procured this beautifully decorated writing pad. He wrote his intentions clearly.
Oh, the King Dave Secondary School collection point.
Yes.
He had to drop the envelope there and then wait an entire week for the post office to collect and deliver it.
Yeah.
I mean, I view this deliberate, slow-paced courtship as an emotional escrow account.
An emotional escrow account. That's a generous term.
Yeah.
But it fits. Every letter he sent was depositing equity into a shared history he believed would pay out once the academic pressures lifted. It requires a highly secure attachment style to maintain that level of investment when the feedback loop is that delayed.
Okay, let me cross-examine that premise right there.
Yeah.
You see an emotional escrow account.
Yeah.
I see the mechanics of intermittent reinforcement.
Intermittent reinforcement? Come on.
Think about the neurology of waiting a full week for a single piece of correspondence. In that silence, the anxious, preoccupied mind spirals. Intermittent reinforcement turns the rural post office into a psychological slot machine.
A slot machine? That's entirely different.
And is it though?
Yeah.
When the environment is silent, the brain perceives a threat to the attachment bond and triggers a nervous system response. It went far beyond natural nerves. He was agonizing over the possibility of receiving an envelope containing, quote, torn pieces of toilet paper, which was a common fear among peers back then.
But he was terrified of the public humiliation. He explicitly notes that when the letter finally arrived, he hid from his friends to open it in a quiet place just in case it contained a rejection. Does that sound like a secure, confident attachment to you?
I mean, yes, contextually. Or does it sound like fragile self-esteem and a hypersensitivity to rejection that basically defines anxious, preoccupied pathology? Same.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame his reaction quite differently. The fear of rejection in a high-friction communication environment is not a clinical
pathology. It's a reflection of high valuation.
High valuation?
Yeah.
Think of it like a high-stakes job interview.
Yeah.
If you apply for a position you desperately want and you have to wait a week for the phone call, your nervous system's going to be on high alert.
Yeah. Sure, but you might even go into another room to take the call so your roommates don't see your reaction if you don't get it. That doesn't mean you have an anxious, preoccupied attachment to the labor market.
Right. It just means the stakes are incredibly high.
That is a clever analogy, but romantic attachment fundamentally differs from a labor transaction because it requires mutual, ongoing regulation.
But the initial mechanism of anticipation is exactly exactly the same.
Yeah.
Robbie valued Jay immensely. The foundation was laid at that St. Angela Girls High School Drama Club event, right?
Yeah.
Dancing to CDM Caratu's Love is Unfair.
Yeah. Right, the inciting incident.
It was a profound emotional imprint. His anxiety while holding that first letter was proportional to the massive value he placed on the connection, not a symptom of some unhealthy internal fixation.
Okay, I understand the romance of that interpretation, but we have to look at how that high valuation mutates when the environment changes.
Yeah.
The environment is exactly my point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the real test of attachment isn't how you behave when the relationship is forming or when you are dancing at a drama club event. It's how you behave when the relationship begins to fracture. And that brings us to the shift into their A levels. Exactly.
The transition to KYN High School and NKB High School in the Merritt District.
Exactly.
This is where the geographic and academic friction really begins to test the bond.
Exactly. And what happens when they move to these prestigious institutions? Jay's communication fades. This is the crucial turning point for our clinical analysis. Fades, yes, but doesn't immediately stop. In modern psychological observation, ignoring a partner's withdrawal is a massive indicator of an anxious attachment loop.
When someone pulls back, a securely attached individual might make a bit for connection, but they ultimately respect the boundary.
Right.
Robbie failed to respect the natural decay of the long-distance correspondence. I completely disagree. He didn't fail to respect it. He's evaluated the data he has and made a conscious commitment to weather the storm.
He explicitly admits he saw the relationship slowly drifting downhill, yet he stated he, quote, refused to give up because he was loyal. He kept writing letters expressing his devotion to someone who was actively withholding reciprocation.
Waiting a week for a letter in this phase is like experiencing a psychological phantom limb.
A phantom limb? Now, who's being dramatic?
Think about it. The connection has been severed by Jay, but Robbie's brain keeps sending signals to the missing part, agonizing over why there's no feedback. He is desperately trying to regulate his own severe internal panic by forcing an external response from a partner who has clearly moved on.
He didn't ignore her withdrawal blindly, nor was he operating from a place of panic. He rationally attributed the silence to their, quote, increased academic workload.
Oh, right, the workload excuse.
We are talking about 2 students at highly rigorous A-level institutions in Kenya. It is entirely logical and, frankly, highly secure to assume your partner is simply overwhelmed with studying rather than jumping to the catastrophic conclusion that they are abandoning you.
But it wasn't a logical attribution. It was a textbook defense mechanism. He couldn't handle the ego injury of her losing interest, so he constructed a narrative where she was just busy.
Right.
Why must we pathologize his loyalty? If you establish a deep bond with someone, environmental stress increases, like a massive academic workload. A secure partner holds the line. Holding the line is one thing. Delusion is another. He wasn't demanding she drop her studies to validate him. He was maintaining his end of the emotional escrow. He was signaling, I am still here when the academic storm passes.
Right.
That is a testament to his emotional stability.
Loyalty to a ghost isn't stability. It's denial. And your defense of his cognitive framing actually proves my point. The academic workload excuse was just the first layer of his denial. How so? Well, because the true depth of his inability to process rejection becomes glaringly obvious when the academic storm does pass and they enter completely different life stages. Which brings us to the socioeconomic argument you lean so heavily on.
Yes. Let's examine that structural reality.
Because no matter how deeply we dissect his internal attachment style, we cannot ignore the external macroeconomic pressures bearing down on them.
Right. The socioeconomic guillotine, as you call it.
Exactly. The source material explicitly points to the historical injustice of the 1960s land registration in the Mount Kenya region.
Right. Which, let's be real, happened long before they were dating.
But the shock waves dictated their reality. Colonial chiefs and their allies secured the highly productive tracts of land. Robbie's family was left with small, rocky, sloping parcels of almost zero economic value. This relegated his family to a subsistence-level socioeconomic status. So fast forward to the end of their education. Jay enters the workforce early.
She gets a job, and Robbie remains a student surviving on a, quote, modest allowance.
We need to unpack what a modest allowance actually means in this context. It means a complete lack of mobility, a lack of status, and an inability to provide in an economy that demands rapid maturation.
I don't dispute the economic history, but I dispute how Robbie uses it.
Let me finish the mechanism of this pressure, though. Jay enters the job market. She gains proximity to power, to wealth, to the harsh realities of adult survival.
And who enters the picture? The famous senior civil servant.
Exactly.
A senior civil servant.
A government official. For a young woman in rural Kenya navigating the transition to adulthood, a senior civil servant presents an escape from subsistence living. It represents undeniable financial security.
Sure. On paper. And
she prioritized that upward mobility over her history with the indigent village boy. That is not an anxious, preoccupied fantasy on Robbie's part. That is a devastating structural failure of the relationship.
But wait, you're taking Robbie's post hoc rationalization as absolute gospel.
You are looking at the senior civil servant as the sole catalyst, completely ignoring the interpersonal dynamics at play here.
I'm not ignoring them. I'm weighting them appropriately against systemic poverty.
Well, if this breakup was exclusively about class barriers, upward mobility, and proximity.
Oh, the ruse situation. That occurred during their school holidays. And it was a minor friction point. It wasn't minor to Jay.
It was just a study session. Robbie himself admits the rumor was partly correct.
Jay brought it up and she wasn't amused. That detail fundamentally disrupts
your economic theses. I don't see how.
It proves the breakup was deeply rooted in the natural friction of separate lives, physical distance, and jealousy. It was about the interpersonal dynamics of two teenagers growing apart, not just some cold calculation of land registration and civil service salaries.
It is a variable, yes. But the structural reality of the senior civil servant is far more compelling when analyzing long-term partner selection in a developing economy.
Is it, though?
Absolutely. The power dynamics of a government official pursuing a young woman entering the workforce completely overshadow a neighborhood study partner.
Do they? Or is the phantom of the senior civil servant just the easiest pill for an anxious, preoccupied ego to swallow? Think about the exact words Jay used in her final definitive letter.
I know the words.
She didn't write, "I am sorry, Robbie." I require greater financial stability and have aligned myself with a government official to ensure my survival.
What did she actually write?
She wrote, "I am sorry, Robbie, I have another dude."
Exactly, I have another dude. The phrasing is devastatingly casual, and that casualness is the entire point. It's just vernacular. But Robbie uses the senior civil servant detail, which, by the way, he only heard through a rumor from a former classmate at King Dave, as a psychological shield. It is much easier for his fragile self-esteem to conclude, "I was defeated by insurmountable Kenyan socioeconomic class system," than it is to accept the mundane, painful truth. Jay just found a more compatible dude in her new adult life.
That is a highly cynical read of a deeply painful power imbalance. You are taking the colloquial word dude and using it to erase massive documented reality of economic inequality.
Not erasing, just contextualizing it within a teenager's psychology.
It is entirely reasonable and frankly highly perceptive for Robbie to recognize that systemic disadvantage. It shows a sophisticated understanding of his environment.
It can be both, though. The economic reality can exist, and Robbie can still be using it to mask his anxious inability to let go.
Masking implies he wasn't genuinely affected by the economic disparity.
Entering the workforce absolutely changes a person. The Kenyan economic shift, but
they would acknowledge the growing economic disparities as Jay entered the workforce.
And they would respectfully bow out, recognizing the relationship had run its course. You are demanding a level of instant emotional processing that the medium of their communication simply didn't allow.
Instant? It took months.
Robbie didn't just struggle to process it, he actively resisted it. He says he, quote, refused to give up even after she was employed and he was still a student.
Because of his investment in the emotional escrow.
He forced her hand. He kept pushing until she had to drop the another dude bombshell to finally sever the pathological cord. He required a catastrophic rejection because he was incapable of accepting a natural fade.
I think we have to respect that in the era of slow physical mail, the speed at which one processes a shifting life stage is naturally elongated. A letter takes a week to arrive. A response takes another week.
That is true. The delay is huge. A misunderstanding takes a month to resolve. What you call a pathological cord, I call a lingering hope, sustained by a medium that inherently delays closure.
When you are operating in an environment of delayed feedback, persistence looks very different than it does in the age of instant digital read receipts.
That is an excellent observation, and it really highlights why examining this specific historical case study is so critical for our audience.
The medium of communication changes from decorated writing pads dropped at King Dave Secondary to instant messaging today, but the underlying psychological mechanisms remain.
The rumination, the idealization.
Exactly, and the denial. It all remains remarkably constant, whether you are staring at an empty mailbox for a week, staring at an unread digital message for an hour. The nervous system reacts to the silence in very similar ways.
By debating the mechanics of their attachment and the structural pressures of their environment, we get a much clearer picture of how complex these dynamics truly are.
Exactly. We aren't here to declare a definitive winner between the structural perspective and the clinical perspective, because the truth usually lives in the tension between the two. The objective data is right there in the text, from that first dance to the final devastating letter.
We highly encourage you to look closer at the source material, examine the historical context of the land registration, evaluate the exact phrasing of the correspondence, and consider how these early attachment styles and economic realities continue to shape how we connect and disconnect today.
There is always more to uncover when you dig into the mechanics of human connection. The psychological loops that keep us attached.
Indeed. We started this discussion by noting how messy these diagnostic waters can be. When a heart breaks across 15 kilometers of Mount Kenya terrain, across deepening class divides, and across the slow, agonizing wait for a physical letter,
well, the fracture is never a clean line. It is a complex web of psychology, circumstance, and survival. Thank you for joining us.